So we've got Roger Goodell talking. We've obviously talked about the Deshaun Watson situation and the comments he had to say about that. There was another scandal in the NFL this offseason. It was the Dolphins and the Tom Brady and the Sean Payton and the punishment for that, and then also Brian Flores's allegations saying that they were bribing him to tank games. And so Roger Goodell spoke about the findings when it came to that. This was the commissioner yesterday.
The integrity of the game is critically important. I think the findings were very clear on the tampering charges. And, while tanking clearly did not happen here, I think we all have to understand that our words and our actions have implications, can be interpreted. We have to be careful.
So Brady, I'm assuming. I mean, everybody can move on now. I mean, I don't know what the issue is here. I think everybody can move on from this when it comes to Brian Flores' allegations. There was no tanking. They did a full deep dive into this. They looked into it, and as Roger Goodell said, look, he got punished. Stephen Ross made some comments, but they weren't made in a serious manner, and it feels like everybody's ready to move on. Don't you think? It's time for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, tell Mike Florio that.
Oh,
he
no.
seems to have a red ass for Roger Goodell and this whole process. Or maybe it's just Stephen Ross. I'm not sure who burned him, but he can't seem to let it go. And the one thing staring, I think, anyone out there who is looking at the accusations of Brian Flores and the lawsuit that was filed against him and why it hasn't been successful or why they haven't been able to find anything is there was no substantiated evidence. And so I'm not going to act like I know whether or not Stephen Ross said it in a serious manner and it was documented necessarily because they don't have enough evidence to prove otherwise. But I also am not ignorant enough to sit there and think that you should go on a media tour upon filing a lawsuit that doesn't have any substantiated evidence behind it and start proclaiming this to be the case if you can't prove it. Because now this just falls, on the floor on deaf ears, and people go, yeah, it was an accusation that was made that didn't have any merit behind it. Even if it actually did, even if it actually took place. And so the first part of that is it was either it just fumbled in regards to how it was portrayed and rolled out initially, or they felt like that was their best shot of gaining some momentum and some steam and validity to all this, or even to get the NFL just to investigate this. But regardless of all that, the thing that stands the accusations or stares it right in the face, and you would think it's otherwise, and Mike Florio or anyone else can deny it, is no player on any team is going to tank. And so you could sit there and say, well, yeah, the organization hopes we have a better draft position next year, sure. But that's not the guys on the field, what they're thinking. And any opportunity anyone gets, they're going to go out there and try to ball out because they know it incentivizes them to either make the team or make any other team for that matter. Everything you do on the field is part of your resume. And that's something that it's undeniable, and it's one where even if a coach told you go in there and tank, you're not going to do it because it's career suicide. And I don't think any player would put his trust in an assistant coach or a coach who would ask him to do that. And I don't think a coach would ask him to do it because the coach's job, it would be career suicide. And I think Brian Flores knew it, which is why, even if it was true, he didn't follow through with it. And furthermore, no player would follow through with it. So if you want to say, hey, they stacked the deck, they played some younger players and all that, the hard part is that ended up, not necessarily being how the season turned out. But even in that reality, it's just you wouldn't see a player ever risk their career to buy into this in the hopes that someone's going to keep you around on the roster? There's no chance of that. Because even if you had made good with that team, because the owner or someone in the front office had asked you to throw a game or not play up to par, you're killing yourself in every opportunity for anything after that team. All the 31 other teams that see that on film, and they're going to say, what's up with that? And if that ever became public, your career would be over, aside from all the allegations that would come along with it in regards to the gambling world or the gaming world. So there's obviously a lot of layers to this, but it seems like this is kind of a case, shut, closed, although some people are still trying to keep it alive.
You ultimately have to add health to that list of things that players won't try to sacrifice as well. When you're tanking, that means that you're not putting forth a maximum effort. And when you're not putting forth a maximum effort and you're probably dealing with a team, an opponent that they're putting forth their best effort, you get hurt. You get hurt in those scenarios. And so to me, the whole tanking thing, I've always found that to be strange because I don't think that in football, it's one of those rare sports. Like you look at basketball, you can tank. You can tank in basketball and people watch it take place. You'll see the best players sitting out in street clothes behind the bench or on the bench watching other guys play.
It happens
That's
every
tanking.
year. Every year
it's tanking.
Yep.
But unless you take those players out that you believe give you the best opportunity to win. Now, if Brian Flores could show that he wasn't dressing his starters and even if he couldn't prove directly that the reasoning was tanking, people would sit there and be like, okay, I remember when all those dudes were sitting out. Why weren't they playing? And if they weren't all hurt, or you put them on a list where they weren't able to play because of their health and stuff like that, well, then now there's records. So you got to be mindful of the fact that if you're just holding guys out, but they could have played, you can go back to the records of what comes out of the training room as to what was the seriousness of nature of what kept them out of the game. So to me, you never saw anything take place, and here's the word of the day, that was egregious enough to sit there and say you were trying to tank games. If you have your starters in the game and those are the guys that are your starters, were projected as your starters, there's no way you can justify that you're tanking games because those players, as Q just mentioned so well, they're not going to go out there and risk their reputations. They're not going to risk their jobs. They're not going to risk their health on the merits of a coach saying, yeah, we need to lose these games so that we can get Trevor Lawrence in next year's draft. I'd be like, Trevor Lawrence can bleep the bleep the bleep. These bleep to the bleep to the bleeps. Like, ain't nobody worried about Trevor Lawrence. I don't give a good god darn how good he is. So you're not going to get guys, grown-ass men, sitting there like, oh, yeah, let's tank so we can get Trevor Lawrence so that we can win. Like, ain't nobody doing that.